Good morning, everyone. I call this session of the Public Service Commission to order. Madam Secretary, are there any changes to the final agenda?
There are no changes to the final agenda.
Thank you. Before moving to the agenda, I would like to conduct a roll call of commissioners. When I call your name, please confirm that you are present. Commissioner Diane Berman.
Present.
Commissioner James Alisi.
Here.
Commissioner John Howard.
Here.
Commissioner Dave Valesky.
Here.
Commissioner John Majori.
Here.
Thank you. Before we turn to the regular agenda, do any commissioners wish to recuse from voting on items 101 or 301? Commissioner Berman.
No, I'm good.
Commissioner Alisi.
No, thank you.
Commissioner Howard.
No.
Commissioner Valesky.
No.
Commissioner Majori.
No.
Thank you, everyone. We'll now begin with the regular agenda. Our first item for discussion this morning, item 101, case 22-G-0610, as it relates to the National Fuel Gas Long-Term Gas System Plan. It'll be presented to us today by Chris Stolicki, Cynthia McCarron, and Shauna Espinoza, and Brandon Goodrich are available for questions. Chris, please begin.
Make sure my mic's on. Good morning, Chair Christian and Commissioners. My name is Chris Stolicki. Make sure people can hear me. My name is Chris Stolicki. I am the Chief of Gas System Planning and Reliability in the Office of Energy System Planning and Performance. I am here today to present item 101, National Fuel Gas Distributions, or NFG, their Natural Gas Long-Term Plan, or LTP, which is the first completed plan under the process the Commission adopted in case 20-G-0131, which I will refer to as the gas planning proceeding. Since the Commission initiated the gas planning proceeding, several policy changes in New York have developed under the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, also known as the CLCPA, setting stage for a challenging planning effort for natural gas utilities. While the primary purpose of the gas planning proceeding is to ensure and maintain reliable service, it institutes an extensive, transparent process that relies on stakeholder involvement. The gas planning proceeding also lays the foundation and defines the framework to take a hard look at gas system planning, layers in goals under the CLCPA, and is very much an iterative process that will evolve into the future. Generally, the planning process has three foundational principles: ensure continued safety and reliability, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and promote affordability for ratepayers. It ensures the Commission, staff, and stakeholders have the necessary information to consider local gas distribution companies, or LDCs, long-term plans and alternative solutions to ensure that New York's residents continue to have safe, adequate, and reliable gas service as the state reduces greenhouse gas emissions and transitions to alternative energy sources. I would like to first provide some background in the gas planning proceeding. At the March 2020 session, the Commission issued its order initiating the gas planning proceeding. Among other things, that order directed staff to propose a modernized gas system planning process and emphasized that the modernized process must be transparent and enable alignment with the state's policies. Additionally, the order initiating proceeding encouraged the use of non-pipe alternatives, or NPAs, to potentially reduce or eliminate the need for gas infrastructure and investments, identified the need to explore methods of demand response and peak reduction, and recognized the need to avoid or mitigate criteria pollutants. In February of 2021, staff submitted a gas system planning process proposal, referred to as the planning proposal, in this proceeding. Staff held a stakeholder forum. There were 2 public statement hearings and 2 rounds of written comments. The Commission approved the planning order in May of 2022, which set forth guidelines for long-term plans and that each LDC is to file every 3 years. NFG is the first to file its long-term plan, which is before you today. As directed in the planning order, in the fall of 2022, through a competitive bidding process, the department hired Charles River and Associates, or CRA, to assist in reviewing NFG's long-term plan and stakeholder proposals. CRA also performed an independent assessment and filed 3 reports over the course of the review. About a month before NFG filed its initial long-term plan, it engaged with stakeholders through a pre-filing technical conference, during which NFG provided background information on its system and operations. NFG filed its initial long-term plan in December of 2022. From that point on, stakeholders had the opportunity to request information from NFG. Multiple stakeholder meetings were filed, facilitated by staff and CRA. Stakeholders also had multiple opportunities to provide comments on NFG's long-term plan. Ultimately, this process led to NFG submitting its final long-term plan, which incorporated comments by the stakeholders, suggestions by CRA, and staff input. The draft order before you today includes directives to NFG that would provide additional information not obtained during the review and further enhance NFG's current and future long-term plans. NFG's long-term plan featured 6 decarbonization actions: energy efficiency, hybrid heating systems and other heating electrification, industrial customer electrification and efficiency programs, thermal energy networks, renewable natural gas or RNG, and hydrogen. The hybrid heating application features a gas furnace combined with an air source heat pump. The heat pump would provide heating when temperatures exceed 30 degrees, but the gas furnace would provide heating at lower temperatures, and therefore all existing infrastructure remains necessary. NFG compared its chosen long-term plan to 3 scenarios. The first scenario was titled the reference case. It reflects business as usual, projects a reduction of approximately 3 1/3 metric tons of CO2e at a cost of about $3 billion. It does not include CLCPA actions not implemented. It refers to existing customer programs, supply-demand forecasts, and natural gas and electric prices. The second scenario was what's called the supply-constrained economy scenario. So it reflects labor and resource constraints experienced under normal economic conditions which act to limit energy equipment manufacturing and infrastructure development. The third scenario was titled the aggressive scenario. NFG described this as an optimistic view that the 6 decarbonization actions will be achievable with respect to the ability of national, regional, and local economy to deliver the labor and infrastructure necessary. It projects a reduction of approximately 4.7 million tons of CO2e at a cost of about $6.2 billion. The forecast monthly bill impacts of the final long-term plan would cost non-participant customers, so those not participating in programs like energy efficiency and weatherization, approximately $217 per month, and presently they are spending less than $100 per month. The aggressive scenario is the other bookend, and that scenario is forecast to cost customers more than $300 per month. In its final long-term plan, NFG responded to stakeholder requests for various additional scenarios. NFG developed what it called informational scenarios, but did not endorse them. The first scenario was an increase in residential and small commercial electrification as necessary to achieve a 40% greenhouse gas reductions from 1990 levels in 2030. This scenario employs hybrid heating systems as a replacement for furnaces for residential customers, includes electrifying boilers using mini splits, and includes electrifying older homes. This scenario has a benefit cost analysis, or BCA, of 0.61. For informational scenario 2, the same specifications as scenario 1 were included, but assumes that residential customers install cold climate heat pumps as a sole heating source and convert all appliances to electricity. This scenario assumes electricity prices as they were specified in National Fuel's aggressive scenario. This scenario has a BCA of 0.64. Informational scenario 3 assumes that legislation is enacted that prohibits installation of fossil fuel equipment in existing residential and small commercial buildings beginning in 2031 and in large buildings beginning in 2036. This scenario requires full electrification for all customers as existing heating and cooling systems fail and does not allow hybrid heating systems for residential customers. This scenario also assumes electricity prices as specified in National Fuel's aggressive scenario. This scenario has a BCA of 0.64. After stakeholder feedback, NFG continues to embrace a hybrid heating system approach, as described above, and that scenario has a benefit-cost ratio of 0.56. It should be noted, however, that NFG has not developed a BCA handbook pursuant to the Commission's BCA framework order. Many stakeholders participated in the review of NFG's long-term plan in this proceeding. Among the stakeholders were Alliance for a Green Economy, the Environmental Defense Fund, National Resource Defense Council, New York State Energy Research and Development Authority, Sierra Club, Earth Justice, the New York Department of State Utility Intervention Unit, Consumer Energy Alliance, multiple interveners, New Yorkers for Clean Power and the New York Climate Realty Chapters Coalition, New York Geothermal Energy Organization, Push Buffalo, and there were 50 public commenters, including the Business Council of New York State, the New York State Association of Plumbing, Heating, Cooling Contractors, the Buffalo Niagara Partnership, and CH4 Biogas. Among the directives in the draft order, consistent with the planning order issued in May of 2022, NFG is required to file annual updates to its long-term plan by May 31st of 2024, 25, and 26, and will file its next long-term plan in December of 2026. The draft order requires NFG to provide additional information in its annual updates, such as including updated market information on renewable natural gas. Further, when NFG files its next long-term plan in 2026, the draft order provides specific requirements for NFG to provide the no infrastructure planning scenario in that filing. To ensure that NFG appropriately considers available planning options, the order would require NFG to cease offering incentives in gas expansion or network enhancement as defined in the Gas Network Enhancement Plan, propose a gas demand response program, develop a benefit costs analysis handbook, advance NPAs by providing information on capital investment projects exceeding $1 million for 2025, meeting with stakeholders to review those projects, and pursuing at least 2 requests for proposals for those NPAs, and submit for the Commission's consideration pilot proposals to compare hybrid heating options between natural gas and air source heat pumps and cold climate air source heat pumps, and cold climate air source heat pumps with electric resistant backup heating. Additionally, the draft order would require NFG to provide reports with additional information, including a report explaining how it developed its heating degree day forecast for a design day, hourly system information that may identify areas where constraints exist, and report information on its portfolio of energy efficiency programs consistent with the NENY order in case 18-M-0084. In summary, the item before you addresses the first gas system long-term plan filed and reviewed. The draft order is the result of a planning proceeding that included an extensive educational effort, stakeholder input, and independent analysis. The recommendation is to direct NFG to take a number of actions and provide additional information over the next 3 years before NFG files its next long-term plan in December of 2026. The proposed modifications would enhance areas of the long-term plan and provide more complete information. As a result of the actions recommended in the draft order, NFG will be taking important steps toward decarbonizing its system and provide a firm basis for its next long-term plan in 2026. This is an iterative process, and each plan creates a building block for the next plan. This concludes my presentation of the draft order. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's clear whenever you do anything for the first time, it's always a challenge and an opportunity. And this long-term plan, as you stated, is the first to appear before the commission in response to our order in 2022. And at the time, when we established that order, the goal was to create a planning process to provide the commission, staff, and various stakeholders with the necessary information to consider local gas distribution companies' long-term plans, but also to explore other alternatives. I think looking at it at a broad scale, this plan has done a good amount of what we had hoped it would do. And the planning process as a whole looks to me to be working as intended. Since filing this plan in November last year, we've seen a great deal of stakeholder engagement in this process. The consultant we've hired to perform an independent check has worked, in my opinion, as needed, providing a check on what NFG has provided. And ultimately, I think we've done a good job of identifying gaps and opportunities to improve the long-term plan going forward. I think this is particularly challenging given the uniqueness of NFG as a natural gas-only utility. Now, again, as the first to appear before us, I want to take a moment and commend NFG for putting this together and doing the effort that they've done. It's always hard to be the first. I also want to commend staff. I know this was far from an easy process, and whenever there's a 100-plus page order with 50-plus page of comment review, that's a testament to a lot of work behind the scenes. So definitely want to make sure you guys appreciate that we appreciate the hard work that went into coming up with what we have before us today. But despite all that hard work, ultimately what NFG provided fell short. In its current form, the plan is not aligned with our mandates, and the limited information, as you've explained, is insufficient for us to make the decisions and actions that we need. There are just too many deficiencies. Deficiencies to the requirements outlined in our earlier order, deficiencies that must be addressed in the future actions, as you described. So thank you for clarifying and providing this to us. This order is not an approval of NFG's plan, but further direction to NFG to refine the plan and make improvements to bring it in alignment with our mandates. So thank you for your hard work in bringing this forward. Commissioner Berman.
Thank you so much. So my job as a regulator is to understand the nature of the vulnerabilities and overall risks faced in this transition. And as we move forward with our decarbonization goals and grid infrastructure improvements, we must recognize that we must ensure we do not lose reliability and resiliency of the grid, and we do so with costs in mind. I look at this and have concerns with the approach that we're taking. I've read the order several times, and I come away each time with a lack of understanding on exactly what we are saying. In fact, depending on what page of the order you're on, you can think that you're approving the plan or denying the plan or actually not acting on the plan at all. And it's, for me, the orders have to speak for themselves. And I guess I will ask, I don't see an ordering clause that says we're denying the plan, we're adopting the plan, we're accepting the plan with modifications, and they have 30 days to come back with the revised plan. So what exactly is the direction other than to do some of the things that are in here? Again, keeping in mind that the order says you did well in some places, you didn't do well in others, and is not necessarily clearly lined up on exactly what they're supposed to do in their, I guess, modifications to the plan.
Commissioner, I think that the order does state that the recommends that the commission decline to adopt or approve the plan, rather than actually recommending a rejection of the plan, which would imply some requirement that they file a further revision to the plan in the near future. The draft order provides recommends that the commission require that the company simply take certain actions that Chris went through. There was reporting actions, developing a BCA handbook, proposing pilot programs to test some of the assertions that the company made that various stakeholders disagreed with about hybrid heating systems, things like that. And so I think the order very clearly lays out a number of reporting and action steps for the company to take over the next 3 years to provide additional information, additional data points, make steps toward decarbonizing its system, and setting up hopefully a successful process in developing the next iteration of its long-term plan in 3 years' time.
Okay, I think I would respectfully disagree that the order clearly lays that out. I think that everything that you said can be found in the draft order. However, I think it is very difficult to understand our regulatory actions and also the direction that we're saying to other companies, which is, I guess, that you may submit, in this case, they submitted 3 different plans, and actually with each plan, they had different scenarios in them. So it was like 9+ trying to appease a lot of the different things we were doing, different, looking at things. So I look at this and I say, okay, so what are we trying to say as we go forward in the gas planning for this company, but also for other companies, which is that we will just kind of give you information on the plans that you submitted. If we think you did well in some areas but not well in others, we'll tell you, give you these directives to deal with, but we're not approving, denying, or modifying the plan. And you'll get another shot in 3 years to go forward. And take it into consideration, because all these cost impacts are going to have to come in your rate cases. But it's an iterative process. We're not really sure because the CLCPA is an iterative process. And so good luck with that. I guess I'm trying to understand the legal underpinnings of us telling them to file plans for the commission to review. I would have thought it would have been like our emergency response plans and other things, where we either adopt it in full, we deny it and tell them we have to do X, Y, and Z, submit within a number of days another plan, or we are modifying the plan. That's not what I'm hearing. And in fact, again, there are aspects of this order that you can read, and there's like at least 10 different versions of where I say, oh, I think that we're adopting this plan. Oh, wait, I think we're denying this plan. Oh, wait, I think that we're modifying the plan. I think I'm pretty intelligent in sort of following process and flow. I can't follow it. And for me, I think that's a regulatory failure, not on NFG, but on us as a commission. We have to have orders that are clear and understanding from the legal review aspect. What is our legal review of the plans? What is the legal review of the plan supposed to be?
So I think that when we were working on developing the gas planning process last year. I think that those of us working on it and presenting recommendations to the commission that the commission adopted had an idea of how the process would play out. However, it was setting up a new process, and as was noted here, NFG is the first utility to go through that process. And there are things that the utilities learn, there are things that staff learns, and that stakeholders learn from actually trying to go through the process as opposed to thinking about the process in the abstract. And so I do think that as envisioned before going through the process, it is fair to say that there was an expectation that there would be an approve, modify, or deny decision at the end of it. I think that having gone through the process, such a decision ends up not being possible, at least not in this instance. I think that to say that the commission, to recommend that the commission approve the plan would be to support everything in the plan, right? And that includes NFG's position of moving forward with hybrid systems, not in just testing hybrid systems, but in planning and assuming that hybrid systems are the way to go. And I don't think that staff was ready to make that recommendation. However, to reject the plan or modify it, it becomes clear. I think it became clear to us, and I ask my colleagues to chime in if they feel otherwise, that there is the 20-year planning horizon, and then there are the actions that are actually going to take place in the next 3 years before the company files its next long-term plan, and takes the learnings and changes in policy landscape and everything else that's going to occur over the next 3 years, and provides the next iteration of its long-term plan. And I think that is what we've tried to present here.
Thank you. I actually very much appreciate what I think is a coherent explanation of the change from the process on the front end, where we had an order that was expecting to either have adopt, deny, or modify. In fact, as a reminder, I actually concurred in part and dissented in part because I was concerned that there was the lack of clarity in what the process would be, and the lack of clarity in what we were doing from a gas planning perspective as it relates to a lot of other things that we're doing. It's not like the companies have not ever been planning before, right? So we're kind of coming in and now layering on a new process. So the word that keeps coming up is it's iterative, right? It's an iterative process. And for me, I generally am supportive of iterative processes. I think it's helpful. The process is really a practice of refining and improving things through multiple iterations, and it can be part of a cyclical process where steps are repeated rather than linear and non-flexible. And when you do that, you're supposed to help with the planning, the designing, the implementation, the testing, the evaluating, and reviewing. And that can lead to good outcomes. And it's really an approach to problem solving that helps sort of break down significant problems into smaller, more manageable pieces, and then each piece can be worked on separately, and then how it fits with the whole. And it can supposed to help to get to a good final solution. And the benefits of an iterative process is improved efficiency, more cost-effective, improved communication and collaboration, doing things with a shorter timeline, reduced risk and faster problem solving, and it involves end users in all of this. My concern with the process that we've set up is the iterative process that we have chosen is not actually a good iterative process. It's not right for the situation that's before us because we are clunky in the approach. And when it doesn't work right, we blame the company. In this case, seems time is of the essence. There's no room for error when we're looking at gas planning from the perspective of keeping the lights on and ensuring reliability. And so I think that it's incumbent upon us as a commission, as you rightfully said, Brandon, that, we're kind of rethinking things because while we went in this process with one mindset of where we would be, we realized that we need to do some more refinements, right? So we're putting more refinement obligations on the company. I am trying to figure out from a principle-based regulatory process, what is it that we are saying in this process to other companies and also to how we now approach things. And I am concerned because I don't think that it makes sense when you look first at the draft order, but when you're also listening to what we are saying, because we are still being unclear in the balls and strikes. From my perspective, one of the things that struck me is the entire draft order is really laying out stakeholders said this, company said this, CRCA did this check, and they say, okay, stakeholders, and a lot of times in the order it says stakeholders are unhappy, right? Stakeholders didn't like this. So there's nothing in here, though, that evaluates from an evidentiary perspective, from an expert perspective, whether the stakeholders' dislike is valid from an energy grid perspective, whether the company is doing the right thing, which I think it is, and our evaluation, our responsibility is to manage the energy transition in a way that is giving valuable, credible, regulatory analysis and recommendations and directives. But yet it seems to be, the takeaway if I read this from a what do we do from the company is to other companies, if the stakeholders don't like it, you got a problem, even if the stakeholders are wrong, because the commission is too afraid to say that in its draft order. I think we need to start being honest with each other on the elephants in the room and the challenges, and looking at it. We may all disagree on whether we think it's right or wrong, but at least we're having that debate and discussion and clearly using the evidentiary record, the facts, the legal underpinnings, the analysis, and that should have been what CRA was doing. Now, CRA in its 3 reports does say in almost every instance, company is responsible. Talk about design day. The company's design day is responsible. But then they punt because they're just the check. They're not there to give this. I would have thought they were going to be more helpful from an independent analysis and expertise, the use of them. Really, they were just the room saver. They were there to make sure that nobody got angry with each other in an unprofessional way. And that they would say, well, stakeholders still not happy, you're still not happy. Okay, here we go. Boom. We don't have an independent analysis from them on some of the very issues that are at the heart of energy grid transformation and analysis that we need. We don't have it in the order. We don't have it presented to us. So how can we move forward if all we're really doing is saying, we're not going to accept your plan because, that's not where we are right now. So do X, Y, and Z, come back to us, do annual updates, which I frankly don't really understand exactly what an annual update's supposed to look like. I guess it's just a filing to say, here we are, this is what our status is. But we're still on this 3-year track for the plan, and keep in mind, company, you haven't been approved, denied, or modified the plans that you've submitted. And frankly, I'd rather debate all three of the different, the initial plan, the interim plan, and the final plan. And again, within each plan are different scenarios that they did. They even went above and beyond in saying, while we don't agree that this is a viable scenario, for purposes of X, we're going to do this. So shouldn't we actually literally go through, as much as it might be painstaking, literally go through each and every one and ask questions about that and come to some understanding from our regulatory responsibility on whether we agree with it or not. And then perhaps some of the things we can discuss that come out through here is we tell them to, come back with more information reporting on their design day. Now, are we saying that there's an issue with their design day? I don't think so. I don't think that would be a sea change to how we normally operate, right? It would also call into question, is this the right forum for that? It seems to me that what we're saying is, this, at least I see it this way, correct me if I'm wrong, we recognize, and this should be what's written in the order, we recognize that the stakeholders don't understand design day. Therefore, it is imperative that we take time to establish and clearly understand that we need to educate folks on the importance of design day and the importance of the forecasting and the challenges with doing that. And we have never had an issue with this company in their design day, ever, that I know of. And in fact, if we did, probably the right opportunity for engagement on that would be through our winter planning or summer planning and all the things that we do. It actually would be when NYSERDA meets with a lot of different stakeholders on winter outlook, with folks who actually understand why there's importance of the design day. And we're going to actually bring in more technical experts to help understand that. And also, it's different for each utility, and there's a reason for that, right? Just like 18 inches of snow in Buffalo is very different from 18 inches of snow in New York City. And we have to understand that. So I don't want there to be a perception that what we're doing is saying, okay, stakeholders, you don't like design day, probably because you want it to be a lower temperature so that, it could help in terms of, what you're doing. But actually, messing around with design day can be a real problem. So what we're saying is, what I think we should be saying is, we need to spend some time, and probably not just the company, it's probably us, DPS, to educate folks on design day, because clearly people don't understand it. And clearly there are some folks who are pushing to change design day that, while well-meaning, actually probably is not the right approach in how we're handling it. I don't know if anyone has any thoughts on that before I move on to something else. You don't have to have thoughts, but
If I can take a moment and talk through what Design Day is and how it's relevant, and maybe this will help further the understanding to people listening to this today.
Thank you.
So, Design Day represents the most extreme weather conditions reasonably expected in a utility's service territory. So, gas utilities design their system to meet customers' demand for gas during these conditions, although they are not experienced often. So, it's important to ensure that gas utilities can reliably provide service in these conditions and to ensure that its customers have adequate heat at times when a lack of heating could be life-threatening. But in order to describe Design Day, we first have to explain what a heating degree day is, which is a measurement from a temperature, usually around 65 degrees Fahrenheit, where customers are neither cooling nor heating their buildings. The lower the temperature, the higher the heating degree day and resulting heating demand on the system. So Design Day is simply the highest number of heating degree days actually experienced in an LDC's region. Now, utilities test the assumptions that go into their forecasts of Design Day on an annual basis. So to do so, LDCs track the actual demand based on operating experience and then perform what we refer to as a backcast at the end of each winter. The backcast is an effort to compare the anticipated demand on the system at a given temperature versus what actually occurred at that temperature. The utilities then use this information annually to test and refine their forecast of demand at Design Day conditions. So it really is the foundation of planning the expected demand on the system. So then, as we went through in this process with the stakeholders, they have to go out and procure enough supply to meet that expected demand.
And it's significantly important, correct?
Yes.
Right. And Design Day has to take into account the temperature, it has to take into account the duration of the temperature, has to take into account the day of the week, has to take into account whether it's a holiday. All of these things can impact. So it's not a quick, just turn down the Design Day a little bit, right? Can't just say, here, it should be X. And it's done annually. It has been done annually, right? And we've never had an issue with the Design Day. We may have impacts with the weather that get factored in to the next Design Day and analysis, right? So shouldn't that be the better approach, is that we're recognizing that we need to educate folks and that we don't now have their, because I think there's going to be an expectation that stakeholders are now going to be allowed to continue this, we want you to change your Design Day in this gas planning process and we want X, Y, and Z. Instead, it should be, this is done annually, this is the process, and this is something that we do not micromanage the company. We oversee it, we look at it, we evaluate. We could go to having our own expertise in-house as well as independent consultants who have expertise, but we do not give it off to others who don't have any expertise to say, well, we don't like it. It would be irresponsible. And it's actually delaying and wasting time on things. So for me, the takeaway should be all companies, we're interested in you helping tell the story on your Design Day and analysis. The way you've been doing it, we've always seemed to think it's working. This is what we're looking at. This is what it is. And then each company can help tell the story, but it's our job to make sure that we're not messing around improperly with Design Day. This is how I say it. You don't have to comment further, but I worry that we spend more time trying to appease and diplomatically not say, we're not going there, we don't agree, this is what we are. doing. And we might as well tell the real story of what we're doing and what we think and why things are important. And when there are issues that we want to change, then let's be open about that too. All right. In here, you say, when you spoke, Chris, that the commission initiated the gas planning proceeding, and since the commission initiated the gas planning proceeding, several policy changes in New York have developed under the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, setting the stage for a challenging planning effort for natural gas utilities, right? And I agree with that, except I did feel like I'm not sure that we are on the same page of what we see as several policy changes. And the reason that it's important to me, and it's not for here, but the reason that it's important is if our policy changes are becoming a challenge, if our policy changes are causing issues, then we should understand exactly what that laundry list of policy changes are, exactly what the implications pro and con are, and perhaps what pivots need to happen to certain policy changes that may have had unintended consequences. So the reason that that's important is because we're coming to the point where our policy changes are negatively impacting costs and reliability. And we need to go in eyes wide open, but we also have a responsibility, fiduciary responsibility, to the ratepayers. And it is no small thing that we are the stewards for the ratepayers. And it's our responsibility to be advocates for that and for any perhaps issues that happen with the policy changes that are impacting negatively and perhaps inappropriately on the ratepayers. And so as we go forward, we should really be much more diligent in laying out exactly what those policy changes are and how they are a challenge. And then examine, I always believe it's important to examine, are we accomplishing what we set out to do? And are there other alternative ways that are more viable to do what we want? Now, the three principles that I agree with, foundational principles: ensure continued safety and reliability. We all can agree with that. Reduce greenhouse gas emissions. We all can agree with that. Promote affordability for ratepayers. We all can agree with that. The direction that we're going is negatively impacting safety, reliability, likely not reducing as much as we think greenhouse gas emissions, and we might be going backwards, and it's definitely impacting affordability in a way that's not helpful. That's how I see it. So our foundational principles are actually being the very things that are being challenged. There's a thing that folks have said since we started this process, that business as usual is no longer an option, right? Would you agree? A lot of people say business as usual can't happen. Utilities are just business as usual. As I see it, we're talking about NFG, a good company that runs its gas plants really well. A good company that cares about its customers. A good company that cares about safety and reliability. A good company that has the lowest rates, at least as of now, until they start putting all layers on all the different other things, in New York. So as far as I'm concerned, business as usual with NFG is pretty damn good. If we are focused on long-term plans and we're seeking to devolve the gas system, we have to understand that costs and increased risks are on the horizon, and we have to fully evaluate that. Not later during the iterative process, not later when we're still trying to figure out the impacts of CLCPA and everything else, now. Keep in mind, NFG has a lot of LMI customers. It's really important that we don't inappropriately layer on more costs to the very customers that can't afford it. So the integrity and reliability of the gas system is paramount. Responsible gas planning is a key priority. And I really do commend the staff team, because I know that you work really hard in trying to deal with a lot of the issues that are before you. And understanding it really matters what we're doing, and this transition is challenging but also scary because of the fact that we are really if it goes wrong, it's a real problem. We don't have the luxury of error. And I understand the process and how it's changed, and how we got to this order before us today. I don't think the process is a helpful one. I don't think that we are really utilizing the tools that we've used for a long time that have worked in our planning processes. We're also layering on something that, we don't require this much direct stakeholder engagement as we do with the ERPs, the electric planning, and other things. And so the challenges of, it's like, this is my analogy, it's like when I go to paint a room in my house, and I invite my mother-in-law, my sister, my kids, a couple of neighbors down the street, the guy at the gas station, and invite them in to help. I'm the one painting, but everybody else is just going to be watching and telling me, you didn't spackle right, you should have done this, you should have taken off the wallpaper in this better, oh, you should have used, the ivory or the blue tone instead. You should have taken off the trim first, or or you should have taken out the rugs. Oh, by the way, maybe you should have gotten a new house to start over. All these things, right? It's everybody and their mother comes in and tells you what to do. And there's no guardrails on the acceptable ground rules when you come in. Everything's open for debate. It's not workable, especially if everybody is told, you need to weigh in now. If you weigh in, you may get what you want, and don't give in to anything. And the person who's holding the paint and supposed to do it is being told, you're not doing it enough. Just keep your arms there for another 10 hours. And don't drip that paint, because you're the one that's responsible. I feel like that's what our gas planning process is devolving into, and it scares me. So within this order, we talk about an iterative process. Part of that has to be about the lessons we are learning now, and that the future of the gas system might not look the same. I support many aspects of the clean energy transition, but I am very concerned about a lot of the potential risks that we're taking on and that we're actually ourselves imposing. Many stakeholders are pushing us to move faster in the transition away from the use of natural gas system, It's important we and they recognize the need to address concerns about safety, reliability, and cost impact to the customers. We have to be able to strike the right balance of stakeholder involvement and how to educate them on the best way to participate in our proceedings. We have to not be afraid to set the guardrails. And we have to be able to tell them that some of the more technical aspects of our work are crucial to system safety and reliability and might not be able to be modified and tweaks in the ways they are requesting, and they might not be helping by delaying in the process. So as we move along in this transition, we're going to face a lot of difficult decisions, and we may have to pivot in our thinking in terms of the policies we're developing to make sure that our actions do not result in unintended consequences that harm customers. In the case of NFG, we're talking about upstate communities that experience extreme cold weather, and we must ensure that customers have access to reliable and affordable heating and other utility services. As we continue our gas planning efforts, we and all of the stakeholders in the proceeding need to recognize that the route and pace of progress towards the gas system transition are likely to be different across the regions of the state, and we have to be honest. Gas is going to be here for a long time. We need it, and it's helpful to our energy transition. In fact, what's missing from here is analysis from the Empire State Development, from the IDAs, from many different economic development entities that know about companies and folks who want access to gas, who are leaving the state, who aren't coming into the state, or some of those very economic development projects that we are touting that need gas. And without that, and without looking at the gas demands in a real way, and instead saying, nope, we don't want you to expand, we want you to contract. This is all about decreasing gas demand. But is it decreasing gas demand so that we can help those who also need the gas? It's depends on who you are and where you sit. And that's a challenge, and we should at least recognize that. It's important to note that the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act said nothing specific about the natural gas system or system planning. It was about reducing greenhouse gas emissions. In fact, gas has been helpful in emission reductions. So this commission and staff have taken meaningful and major steps to structure a planning process that recognizes the need to decarbonize our heating systems, but to do so in a responsible, managed way. My concern is that we are in this process that's already set up for failure because we are not recognizing the real value of the gas system in helping us meet our obligations and helping us meet our emissions. And instead, we're focused on taking away the very things that can be helpful to that process. Is it really necessary to say, NFG, we want all your gas to go away? Is that helpful? I don't think so. There can be no disconnect between the gas and service it provides, heat and hot water to homes and businesses. In fact, we may need to take what is currently an economy-wide emissions reduction requirement and come up with ways to make this more manageable at a regional or utility level and to be more honest about what we're doing. The Commission has several related proceedings underway: Clean Energy Fund, New Efficiency, New York, Transmission Planning, Clean Energy Standard, Electric Vehicle Make-Ready Proceedings, all of that. And it's focused on allegedly solving, I said allegedly, I underscore that, the build out of our electric system in a responsible way and the need to encourage energy efficiency efforts in our building. We have to keep in mind the costs and interactions of all the various proceedings, but then other things, EPA, DEC and what they're doing, cap and invest, air permits, zero emissions technology proceeding, disadvantaged communities. There's so many moving parts, and yet we're saying, but NFG, you got to keep going even if you don't know what the roadmap is on a lot of different things. It's crucial we integrate our planning efforts on the gas system side with the electric system. Next, we and stakeholders need to understand that all the actions we take in these separate proceedings all come to bear when we address costs and utility rate cases. Transitioning away from gas is going to cost in the hundreds of billions of dollars. Transitioning away from gas, let me repeat, is going to cost in the hundreds of billions of dollars. And we cannot put all of that cost on the backs of the utility ratepayers, and we have to be honest about that. All the actions that we take must be done in a way that preserves our foundational principles, reliability, safety, and affordability of our energy system. And when we are threatened that it is not going to preserve reliability, safety, and affordability, we have an obligation to speak not at the crisis point, but as we see that coming. It's like standing on a railroad track and you see the train coming. When do you jump off? When do you get out of the way? And who's responsible? We're at that track point. National Fuel, as a gas-only utility company, is responsible for delivering gas to its customers. It's not a bad company, as some have tried to portray. We should be acknowledging that. We're talking about a company that came into the state to provide gas service to homes and businesses that were served by even more polluting or more expensive fuels in an effort to improve the services being provided to them. This was part of a multi-decade effort of gas system expansion, and we're now essentially inexplicably talking about a massive shift in their business model. National Fuel Gas supports thousands of employees in the state and are one of the biggest employers in the western New York area. They have been providing a critical public service to the state, and we need to be cognizant of impacts to this business, the community, and the residents they serve, and stakeholders should be respectful of moving forward, whatever comes next in this proceeding. One of the major stakeholders that's a challenge here is the state itself, and we need to acknowledge that. I do have specific concerns with this order. I do have specific concerns with the process, and I do have specific concerns with the direction we are going. It's not just for this first gas planning. We all acknowledge it's the first. We expected it to be clunky. We understand that it's clunky. I am not seeing us taking lessons learned and helping improve the process going forward for this company as well as the others. Now, I want to be clear. It's not that I think we have to wait to take steps until after there's a true discussion about transition and how to pay for it. I do believe we need to have better discussions as a regulatory body. Rather, though, I think the steps we are taking may very well be the wrong steps. They're not based on objective, factual, and legal expert decision-making. It seems to me we fail to have evidentiary support in the record for this gas planning, and I can't support the direction that we're going without making sure that we're doing the right thing and going back to our foundational principles. So I'm going to be voting no for this order. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Alisi.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll try to be succinct. We have to act on this. And with regard to your comments of Commissioner Berman, taking all of that into account, it leaves little to say except that we always rely on the expertise and the dedication of our staff. And by and large, I am always grateful for that and the direction that comes from our staff. And based on that, I'm inclined to embrace what's before us here. But I must say that there is a tremendous amount of ambiguity, and it causes me pause to just straightforward say, I'm going to support this and move on to the next commissioner. I do have concerns, but I also think that we do rely an awful lot on the expertise that we don't have individually, and that's what I'm doing with my vote today. As time goes on, and we've seen this numerous times with numerous issues, if corrections have to be made, we rely on the marketplace to make those, as well as relying on the commission and the department to initiate changes and corrections. And I'm quite certain that that's going to be the case here. But I'm confident that this report, as I said earlier, as ambiguous as it is in some instances, that it's solid enough for my vote, and that would be a yes vote.
Thank you. Commissioner Howard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, a couple of questions just to get on the record. Commissioner Berman made reference to it, but can we safely say that NFG has the lowest cost of any gas distribution utility in the state?
I could confidently say they are among the lowest. Yes, currently.
Very diplomatic, thank you. And to that end, the scariest part of this order and analysis is the various scenarios, which by and large no one took really much umbrage on the costs that were estimated by the company. So in each one of those scenarios, it's basically scenario one, a doubling of cost, scenario two, a tripling of cost, and scenario four, or three rather, is God knows how big. So I think that in the world of stakeholders, the tens of thousands of customers of NFG are the ultimate stakeholders. And I question how much they know what we're talking about for them. I really do. I'm pretty sure if you went door to door in Tonawanda, knocked on doors and said, hey, did you know? They would go, no, that can't be true. Why would anybody double or triple my heating bill? Why would that be okay? So again, I think in terms of this exercise, not only this exercise, but all the ensuing exercises we're going through, we need to make sure that customers, the ultimate stakeholders, are aware of what could happen. So again, as I said, that largely the debate on the cost of the energy transition has been, unfortunately, largely kept to the side. The second thing is because I'm a stakeholder, I label myself in, merely my hopes and dreams do not make me all my positions 100% legitimate or illegitimate for that matter. But that's why we're here, to temper those hopes and dreams by the realities of the 100-plus-year-old system of regulating gas utilities in this state. And what that means, and the desire, and rightly so by many, of the pace of change to lead us to a decarbonized environment has to be, again, tempered by the reality of, okay, it's going to take this long and it's going to cost us this much. Can we go forward next? And with a broad understanding of those, because clearly when the CLCPA was drafted and signed, those questions weren't really posed, not even debated. And having participated in the Climate Action Council deliberations for a period of time, where I had hoped that those issues would have been brought to the fore, that didn't happen either. So that's that. And the other question here is, and this one, Dodgen, again, Commissioner Berman made reference to it, who gets gas in the future? Who gets it, whether it's existing customers or new customers on the horizon? Not with this company so much yet, but as we get to some of the other gas LDCs, where new customers, very important, maybe region-changing customers are on the horizon, will require massive amounts of natural gas for their processes. My guess is, and that's why I believe our state's economic development agency needs to be much more integrated or participate in these processes, is that when we are out marketing our state or any particular region for a new, like, region-changing customer, we have to be honest that some of them are going to require gas, lots of it. So as we are acting as the state of New York, we are going one way on electrification and decarbonization for some, and with others, it would appear to be a business as usual scenario, because those customers, particularly the future customers, just wouldn't come. They'd go somewhere else. And the other question is, for the existing customers, particularly the big takers on the industrial side, we haven't given them any signal what the hell's happening. Am I going to have gas? My planning horizon's a decade long. Some of the machine tools I got to order take 5-6 years between the time I order them and the time I get them. So whatever we're making, tires, microelectronics, you name it, their planning horizons have to coincide with something. And I just don't think this, if I was a site selection or a supply chain manager of a large company, I wouldn't be able to make heads or tails out of what this order says for me. So I'm greatly concerned by that. And I would hope that as the process goes forward, that these sort of questions are answered one way or the other. And finally, one is one of the ultimate policy decisions that we're really not answering here yet, is what is the obligation of existing and potentially future gas customers to paying for electrical infrastructure improvements? That is, we don't know. And for those companies whose service territories are combined, meaning that the electric system is owned by the same entity as the gas system, a hell of a lot easier. And as a matter of fact, certain utilities in the state are big proponents of rapid electrification for a variety of reinvestment reasons. So, you know, nobody knows what that is going to look like yet. And what is the upward limit of individual gas customers' obligation to invest in electrical systems that, and in this case, that revenue stream would go largely to a different company or companies. So something that I think is a policy decision, the sooner we get to it, the better off we will be. And as Commissioner Berman pointed out, it's going to take a lot of money. And I understand in a world of limited access to new dollars, we'd squeeze every corner of the melon we could to get a couple to make it happen. And I guess the last also big policy question, not answered, actually not discussed at length even, is what is the ultimate value of these companies? They've invested many hundreds of billions of dollars, tens of billions of dollars in plant and equipment, approved by this commission, often with very long lives, sometimes a half a century or more, with amortizations in parallel with that. Well, what happens when we shrink that? What happens, and how are the debt and equity holders of these companies, who will be compensated one way or the other, how we make that happen? And do people understand, again, going back to those customers, understand that, you mean they stop selling stuff and we still got to give them money? Yeah, we do. Or they will see us in federal court for a taking. And that reality hasn't sunk in either. So again, I think those fundamental questions that sort of supersede a whole variety of, individual questions need to be first and foremost. And I would hope that as we see new gas planning submissions, that these big, giant policy issues are at least mentioned, if not addressed in some detail. But that being said, I do appreciate the hard work everybody's in and the box that was created by this, and the uncertain legislative future that could happen that would greatly impact not only this submission but all future submissions, which we haven't gotten to. And I noticed we didn't take any analysis on that because we don't know what's going to happen. But again, if in fact the legislature acts on a variety of planned things, some of which have already passed one or both houses, is that needs to be part and parcel of this. Or if in fact it happens during this extended process that we've given NFG, that they have to come back and answer it quickly. And what does this mean to the plan that you submitted? Again, that is trying to predict the future, but you don't have to be that smart to figure out that that's probably coming. So, those are my concerns. I am going to be voting for this, mostly because this is it was, despite the amount of work and by staff and stakeholders, this is just the first step, and a relatively small step, modest, before we start taking some of the bigger steps that we may not know how firm the ground is under us as we take them. So With that, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will be supporting this.
Thank you. Commissioner Valesky?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity to speak for a few moments. I think first, I should say, since we're all commenting on things that my good friend Commissioner Berman said earlier, I should note that her little painting analogy sounds an awful lot like a situation that exists in my own household. So thanks for that, Commissioner. This is a sort of a unique order for me because I don't often find myself faced with an order that I really could go either way in terms how I vote. That's very unusual. By the time I'm here sitting, I'm usually pretty clear, at least in my own mind, where I stand. And for a lot of reasons that have already been said, so I won't belabor the point. I am prepared to support the order, thanks to the hard work that has been done by our staff. Commissioner Alisi certainly referred to that earlier, as well as the company, as well as stakeholders, as well as a need to, I think, continue to move the iterative process along, and I think that is important. So I am prepared to support the order, but not without some serious and significant concerns about the process. And this is actually where Commissioner Berman started her remarks, and I just want to pick up, and I'll do it as I do from time to time, just reading very briefly just a paragraph from the order itself, because to me there's something about the conclusion of this order that just seems to be a bit counterintuitive to me. And here's what I mean by that. So this is on page 21, 22, for those of you who might be following along. Our conclusion in the discussion section of the order says, for the reasons explained below, the Commission declines to adopt a specific long-term plan for NFG at this time, which, Chris, you mentioned in your presentation. Instead, we require NFG to take a variety of actions, including proposed pilot projects, and providing additional information in its annual updates to this long-term plan. I'll pause there. A long-term plan that we're not approving today, as well as in its next full long-term plan. As stated in the planning order, which happened before I was here, by the way, NFG shall file annual updates to this long-term plan. Again, not approved by us, but we're going to continue to work off, my understanding is, a long-term plan that did not receive Commission approval. Annual updates by May 31 of 2024, 25, and 26. NFG shall file its next full long-term plan by December 15th, 2026. So, again, there's just something that's counterintuitive about that, and Commissioner Berman referred, I think, as a analogy to the emergency response plans that come before us, that we either approve or we don't. So this, I guess, will continue to work off something that we're not approving. I'm concerned about what the message that sends to NFG itself, but I'm also even more concerned about what it sends, the message that it could send to other companies, some of whom have already filed their plans and are going through the iterative process, and some haven't. And I'll just mention where we are in those. So as a result of the gas planning order, a timeline was set up. NFG, my understanding, didn't volunteer to go first. This came from that gas planning order. And the next ones that have already filed, my understanding is Con Ed and NYSEG RG&E have already filed their long-term plans with the department, and they're currently going through the same process that NFG has, that stakeholder engagement and the staff consultant review process. The next filing to come will be Central Hudson's next month. So I am concerned about the message that it sends by not either approving or denying a plan. It almost says, or could be taken to other gas companies, well, let's just file what we think might be good enough. We'll sort of modify it, I guess, based on what some stakeholders may or may not say. And the Commission since they don't have to approve or deny, it almost becomes a default long-term plan that the commission, I guess, based on what they're about to do with NFG, they'll tell us to do a few other things, but we still get to work off what our long-term plan is. Again, that just seems to be counterintuitive to me. You either approve something or you reject it. You say go back to the drawing board and send us a new long-term plan that we can actually maybe approve at some point. Again, notwithstanding those serious concerns, I will support the order because of the work of where we are in the process. But I would just hope as we go forward in this process with NFG, and particularly with future long-term gas plans from other companies, I would hope we would consider the comments that I've shared today. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner Majori?
Thank you. The way I read the order is that we were actually ordering 16 different actions, 14 of which are directed at NFG. And I'll say that I agree with all 16 of those actions that we're ordering. My question, which is related to some of what we've been discussing today, is as a practical matter, if the entirety of the order was exactly the same with 2 changes, what difference would it be if we had a sentence in here that said we're denying the plan, but everything else about the order was identical, except where, as Commissioner Valesky pointed out, we are directing NFG to make updates to this plan. If instead of the word update it said revisions. So if we characterize this order as a denial, and we characterized the actions that currently are characterized as updates as revisions, as a practical matter, how would this, what different would happen?
Commissioner Majori, I think in some sense, and other commissioners, I think in some sense it might be simply semantics. I think I know that in looking at this, I think the one thing that occurred to me is that rejection of the plan or denial of the plan would imply or sort of beg the question of, okay, so where is a full revision of that plan coming then? And it doesn't seem fruitful to me to like require a further revision of that plan in the near term, as opposed to providing the company with directions to further develop information and take certain actions as laid out in advance of the next iteration of the plan that was already envisioned for 3 years from now, and that this order puts on the schedule for 2026. I don't, if that helps.
Okay. No, that makes sense to me, and I tend to agree that the distinction is closer to being a semantic distinction than a substantive one. And I think that this order is closer to being a denial than an acceptance. And again, I go down to the bottom line of what it is that we're doing, and that the bottom line is detailed in the so ordered portion of the overall order. And when I look at those component parts, I agree with all of them. So I'm going to vote yes. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, at this time I'll do a call for a vote on this item. My vote is in favor of the recommendation to direct National Fuel Gas to modify the long-term plan as discussed. Commissioner Berman, how do you vote?
I vote no on the draft order.
Thank you. Commissioner Alisi,
Yes.
would you be kind enough to say that a little closer to the mic, please, so we can make sure we heard your yes?
Alisi voting yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Howard?
Yes.
Commissioner Valesky?
Yes.
Commissioner Majori?
Yes.
Thank you. The item is approved and the recommendations are adopted. Thank you, everyone. We'll now move to our second item for discussion today. Item 301, case 18-E-0130, as it relates to the Energy Storage Roadmap Final SGEIS. It'll be presented today by Marco Padula. Peter Sheehan and Scott Nevins are available for questions. Marco, when you are ready, please feel free to begin.
Good morning, Chair Christian and Commissioners. Item 301 is a draft order in case 18E-0130 in the matter of Energy Storage Deployment Program, addressing the final supplemental generic environmental impact statement, or SGEIS. In December of 2022, Department of Public Service staff and the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority filed a document in this proceeding for your consideration titled New York 6 Gigawatt Energy Storage Roadmap Policy Options for Continued Growth in Energy Storage. I'll refer to that as the 6 Gigawatt Roadmap. The 6 Gigawatt Roadmap recommends the adoption of an increased statewide energy storage goal of 6 gigawatts from the current 3 gigawatt, and includes actions that the Commission may take to encourage the installation of energy storage systems across the state. In compliance with the State Environmental Quality Review Act, or SEQRA, a draft SGEIS was prepared, which analyzes the probable environmental impacts related to the potential actions under consideration in the 6 gigawatt roadmap, and the means available to minimize any such impacts found to be adverse. The SGEIS builds upon and incorporates by reference relevant material from the 2018 Generic Environmental Impact Statement that was completed for New York State's 3 gigawatt energy storage roadmap, which was adopted by the Commission in 2018. The SGEIS considered the generic impacts of implementing the 6 gigawatt roadmap recommendations, including those impacts on public health and safety, potential fire hazards and with lithium-ion batteries, land use, life cycle emissions, recycling or end-of-life disposal of spent batteries, and environmental justice concerns. Recall that on September 15, 2023, the Commission issued an order accepting the draft SGEIS, and it was noticed for public comment. 2 sets of comments were received in response to the draft. One from the clean energy industry, consisting of the New York Battery and Energy Storage Technology Consortium, the Alliance of Clean Energy New York, and the Solar Energy Industries Association, which were supportive of the draft SGEIS, but suggested additional consideration related to public health and safety, mineral extraction, and waste management. A second set of comments was submitted by Forum Energy, which were in support of the draft SGEIS and suggested that the report consider additional alternatives to lithium-ion batteries. Following the close of the comment period, a final SGEIS was prepared, which responded to the public comments. It is important to note that the final SGEIS does reference the Interagency Fire Safety Working Group that is charged with ensuring the public health, safety, and security of energy storage systems across the state, which was formed following the battery storage fire incidents earlier this year. That working group continues its work on incident investigations, review of codes, standards, and regulations, and inspections of existing projects. The outcomes of that working group are separate and apart from any actions taken by the Commission in the draft order before you. Importantly, all energy storage projects in the state will be subject to any future requirements that come out of the working group's review and recommendations. So by adopting the draft order before you, the Commission will have accepted the final SGEIS as complete. As required by Title VI of New York Codes, Rules and Regulations, the final SGEIS will be published in the Environmental Notice Bulletin. After the public has had an opportunity to review the final SGEIS, the Commission may issue a finding statement before or at the same time as acting on the 6 gigawatt roadmap. For reference, a positive finding statement means that the project or action is approvable after consideration of the final SGEIS and demonstrates that the action chosen is the one that avoids or minimizes adverse environmental impacts presented in the SGEIS and weighs and balances them with the social, economic, and other essential considerations. That's the action you'd be taking some point in the future. This concludes my presentation, and we are happy to take any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Marco and team. So with this, the supplemental generic environmental impact statement, or SGEIS, the need for this, as Marco mentioned, is triggered by the environmental review as called for under the State Environmental Quality Review Act. And this occurred when the storage target was increased by 6 gigawatts from the previous 3 gigawatts. So though this item, through this item, we've examined the various probable environmental impacts possible through the actions taken to achieve this new target, as well as means to minimize those impacts, means that are consistent with the law. To be clear, this document is not for a specific individual project or technology, but it looks at the impacts of the various areas mentioned in staff presentation and incorporates a variety of feedback from various stakeholders. So thank you very much for the presentation and for the additional point on the influence of the Fire Safety Working Group once it concludes. Commissioner Berman.
Thank you. I actually have two questions. I recognize that the interagency working group is separate and apart from our agency. When are they planning on concluding, to the extent that you know?
So I don't have an exact date, but the latest information we have is that the group will continue working through 2024.
Okay. Can you sort of explain then why we're taking action now if the working group itself, which will inform us, has not completed or decided, their next step? Just kind of explain what's the need now to move this now?
The need now is if you recognize that the final generic environmental impact statement takes into account all the existing rules and regulations that apply to energy storage, and as energy storage impacts environmental aspects. So anything that comes out of the working group will be something that any storage facilities will be subject to in the future, and nothing what you're doing today would preclude any of those rules or regulations applying in the future when they are ultimately adopted.
What if some of those rules change things? does that have to get SAPA'd? What happens if it changes the actual substance of the final GEIS?
I don't believe that it would change the substance of the GEIS. So GEIS, by its nature, is generic, and it looks at environmental impacts writ large around the state that might occur, right? There's going to be a site-specific review with any of the actual facilities that are built. So one of the main things that it does is it looks at the existing regulatory regime, what regulations are out there that could be implicated in that site-specific review. So, for example, it identifies the updates to the fire code that were done in 2020. Another thing it identifies is the working group, and so those issues are identified just to simply provide the kind of framework of various statutes and requirements that could apply in the future to mitigate any environmental impacts.
Thank you. I'm going to be cautiously concurring on this. I think that staff has done a good job. I do think that there are a number of issues within the document itself that are not fully explored in terms of some of the potential next steps as it relates to safety, in particular from the fires. And it does concern me that we're moving forward without necessarily clarity. However, I will say that I was briefed informally here with some of the direction that folks are taking with the working group. Not anything out of school, but really just an update on what the state agencies are doing. I did feel that there is a real dedication to trying to resolve the safety issues, trying to get under the hood with that. And I appreciated the due diligence in responding to the commissioners, myself in particular, concern when we voted on the draft GEIS. So that gives me comfort. However, I do think it's a little bit clunky, especially because a lot of these storage issues are going to require a lot of substantive engagement and perhaps direction. I also am a little cautious in terms of I do believe strongly in communities' needs and desires and wanting to make sure that we are focused on not lessening that, and I think that has a lot of implications if we are to change, whether it's rules, regulations, or the law as it applies to local communities, because it may require us to engage further substantively on our regulatory actions as it impacts storage and other things that we're doing. So with that, I am going to be concurring cautiously. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Alisi?
Thank you to the staff. I have no comments or questions.
Thank you. Commissioner Howard?
Thank you, and thank you, Marco and crew. You know, I had a few concerns, and I am gratified that several of my concerns have been answered in this particular order. And but that being said, energy storage technology is rapidly advancing. What may be available as early as several years from now is different than what we have today. And so what we're really talking about in today's reality is a lithium-ion based storage system, which we know, at least through 3 communities in the state, have had issues. And we do have a process, this parallel process of various agencies trying to address those particular issues. I'm not 100% comfortable with the parallel stuff, because that means we all got to get to the same place at the same time. And so staying on top of that will be enormously important because communities all across the state are rightly concerned about the introduction of particularly lithium ion technology coming to their communities and what that means. I am convinced that any technology, well, not any technology, but most technologies, but include certainly lithium ion stacks, can be built and operated with a high degree of safety margin. But everything's got to go right. They have to be manufactured right. They have to be installed right. And they have to be maintained properly. So one of the things I would really need to see coming out of the parallel process is that we really do need a lithium ion cop on the beat. Because this is, we know that fires have occurred. We also know that fires will occur again. So minimizing that risk, and remember, Secret doesn't say risk is completely eliminated through its process. It is limited to the extent practicable and acceptable. I think there are those who would believe that this lithium ion technology, particularly in large installations, is right on the edge of making that test. So again, paying attention to those final rules and the like will be very important. Going through some of the other issues that I've had concerns with that particularly come up in certain aspects of the CLCPA. It's about where the source of materials, again, I'm going to limit my comments largely on lithium ion technology. First of all, where the source of raw materials come from, how they're extracted, manufactured, and dealt with. Because today, if the developers are buying equipment that's not made here, by and large, and it's certainly the component materials come from some places that have very, very troubling environmental practice and record. And on a personal thing, I believe that the issue of environmental justice goes beyond our borders. And we can't export our environmental problems on places that are already overburdened. Making lithium ion stacks with coal-based Chinese electricity is not the great trade. That everybody needs to be aware of that. Additionally, some of the rare earths, and they currently are mined and processed, come from really troubling places of the world. And again, we need to be mindful of it. While it's helping us, it could be hurting others. The next thing that this issue becomes is, at the end of the day, is how we deal with fire safety. That is clearly throughout the document the biggest concern and risk that is posed by the current technologies. And the truth is, in New York, we have maybe the broadest range of capabilities of our fire service of any state in the union. With the fire department of the city of New York being the premier fire department in the nation, if not the world. And their practices and recommendations, particularly on permitting and siting and observing construction, I trust will be at the highest level available. One of the things that concerns me is, will that high level of scrutiny go to the least capable communities in our state? because while we have the FDNY, the premier organization, we have fire departments, particularly in rural areas, that are volunteer in nature, difficult to operate today, to do through lack of membership and financial viability and the like. So whatever process that is provided from this parallel track needs to serve the most rural and ill-equipped community at the same level that we are with our biggest municipality, the city of New York. Any system that says New York City has this level of safety, but other communities have a less than situation is highly unacceptable. And to that end, we also will need to figure out, which we don't do in this, is a revenue stream of some magnitude that will bring all agencies, fire services, up to the same level. And it's not just equipment, which in hard costs, but training. Training is going to be optimal. And what we have seen from the incidences have they been to date, that level of training really varied tremendously from the three communities involved. So again, and it may not sound like a lot of money, but it's a lot of money over time, because particularly in the volunteer services, folks come, they go, and in the paid services, again, the bringing people up to speed, and as new technologies and new parameters come on board, that they need to be incorporated. So again, this is largely, I think, will be a legislative to do, is that we need to be able to fund communities so they can handle this technology. And whether it comes from some fee-based thing from the developers or something else, I don't have an answer to that. But I do know that the need exists today and will exist even more as there's these systems proliferate. I will be supporting this, and I do appreciate the work that everybody has done. But again, nothing could be more important than the safety of communities, particularly on the fire side. And unfortunately, New York has a very bad distinction this year of having more fire deaths than any other state. These are unrelated things, but it does put communities on edge and puts an additional strain on the fire service. So with that, I will be voting yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Valesky.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I too will be supporting this item. Just a couple of quick questions for you, Marco, if we could. Just want to acknowledge the fact and appreciate staff's attention to the working of the Interagency Fire Safety Working Group, and including a summary of that effort thus far. But just to clarify, even though the actions of the commission are separate and apart from that working group, the Department of Public Service is in fact a member of that interagency working group, correct?
Yes, that's
Okay.
correct.
And you, in fact, I believe are the member or the designated.
I'm not.
You're not. Okay. Okay. Well, you're leading it well.
There are many others in the department beside me.
Okay. All right. Okay. Can you just share with me the potential or the earliest potential time frame in which the commission could see and act on the 6 gigawatt roadmap? And you have mentioned that, assuming this item is approved, that the commission may issue a finding statement and may then act, after public notification. So what would be the earliest time frame in which the roadmap itself would come before the commission?
Well, technically, there is a number of day time period under which the final generic environmental impact statement must age. And I think it's only 10 days. And the council could correct me on that, on the actual number of days. But in reality, bringing the roadmap to the commission will be sometime in early next year.
Okay. Okay. I anticipated that would be the case. The reason why I asked the question is, and I think Commissioner Berman alluded to it earlier. There are lots of things that may be going on in this space. There was a unconfirmed, and I'll specify unconfirmed press report about a week ago or so that the administration may be considering changing the siting and permitting process for storage projects as well as transmission projects, for that matter, to follow a model that more closely resembles what was done a few years ago when the Office of Renewable Energy was established, and how generation siting and permitting is handled. I only mention that because that may be taking place. Again, that would be something that would be subject to negotiations with the legislature, of course, but it is something I think that we as a commission should certainly keep our eye on as we approach the new year. Again, Chair, I'll be supporting the item. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Majori?
Thank you. So I just want to ask a question to clarify one thing that came up in the discussion already. Actually, in the chair's remarks, he mentioned that approval of this FSGEIS is not the same as approving a specific project. Those weren't the words. He was more eloquent than I was. But is that correct? The approval of this order and approval of this final supplemental generic environmental impact statement is unrelated to the approval of any particular project. Is that correct?
That's accurate.
Okay. And that what happens on approving this is, again, this was already addressed, is that the next thing that happens is that at some point down the road, we'll see the roadmap, as opposed to the next thing that happens is that a particular project will come to fruition. Is that correct as well?
That is, and just to summarize it, like the purpose of the State Environmental Quality Review Act is to, include in an agency's decision-making consideration of environmental impacts. An EIS, or when a determination is made that there are no significant impacts, a negative declaration would be issued. Those are seen as interim agency actions, not final actions. The final action here would be the final plan on the 6 gigawatts that would be considered, as Marco noted, likely early next year.
Okay. All right. All my other questions were already answered, actually. So thank you very much. I will be voting in the affirmative. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to take a point of personal privilege and ask one more question, a clarifying question regarding the working group. So at the conclusion of the working group's efforts, is it safe to say that whatever comes out of that in terms of improvements and modifications to existing safety standards, those would be applicable to what's already installed and future installations? Is that a safe assumption to make?
I would say that's definitely a safe assumption. Correct.
Okay. Thank you. Just wanted to clarify and add that to the record. Okay. That said, I'm going to do a call for a vote. My vote is in favor of the recommendation to accept the final SGEIS as complete. Commissioner Berman, how do you vote?
I concur.
Commissioner Leasing?
Yes.
Commissioner Howard?
Yes.
Commissioner Valesky?
Yes.
Commissioner Majori?
Yes.
The item is approved and the recommendations are adopted. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate your time on this. Now, before we go into the consent agenda, I just want to take a moment. The analogy used earlier about the painting resonated with me a little bit, in part because in my past role, I guess I was one of the people sitting in the room criticizing the painters. And I think I'm unique in that perspective being here. And I just wanted to share a few things about that perspective and just the commission overall and stakeholder engagement. So, sitting here as chair, I think it's clear to me that we at the commission very much value stakeholder engagement. It's an integral part of all our efforts. We make it clear in almost every order. In fact, it's baked right into public service law, the importance of stakeholder engagement. It's essential both to maintaining transparency in the actions that we take and the rationale behind them, but also in providing a diversity of perspective and thought related to potential policies and regulations that we may bring about. Now, you can appear before the Commission in any number of ways. We offer public statement hearings. There are processes where you can provide verbal or written comments. But ultimately, we try to have an open door to stakeholders to engage as fully as they are capable of. And that engagement could be passive as observers or fully engaged as active participants in everything from proceedings like the ones we discussed earlier to rate cases that are many-month-long processes. Now, it's clear to me, and I think it's clear to many of us, that interest in our work has increased significantly. And given where we are in the energy transition, given the impacts of climate change, this makes perfect sense. The general public wants to be informed. They want to be aware of what's happening. And we at the Commission have processes in place to allow for that information to be publicly available and for individual members and stakeholders to engage. We seek this engagement because it enhances the opportunity for us to forge new pathways towards addressing the various mandates we must accomplish. Now, many of our processes are long-standing practice, but many of them are established in public service law, and many more are informed by court decisions that highlight and interpret various process requirements based on past experience and precedent. Ultimately, we at the Commission do our best to operate within these established boundaries. Doing so establishes both a consistency in process and a consistency in our relationship with stakeholders and how they can engage. And it provides transparency, clarity, and sets expectations on how that engagement may come about over time. Now, this overarching principle has guided our process for pretty much every order. If you were paying attention to the NFG order, you'll note that was a very particularly long process, a very engaged process. The SGIS we just approved, I believe we only had 2 commenters on that, but nonetheless, the opportunity was there for individuals to engage, and as is evident from the order, that engagement did contribute to the final outcome. And these are just 2. There are many more items where I could cite examples. 2 in particular in the consent agenda that we're about to discuss, one related to petitions from the Clean Air, Water, and Soil Group in Long Island, and the Public Utility Law Project, where we will highlight what they've requested in terms of changes to the process that are not necessarily allowable in public service law. Ultimately, the processes we have in place, in my view, provide for opportunities for any individual, any stakeholder to engage, and that engagement is a valuable part of our ability to do our job. Further, that engagement is bounded by a set of guardrails that ensure consistency between individual stakeholders and over time. So I just want to add, this is a very important thing for us, and we want to make sure that all stakeholders can engage. And as a former stakeholder engaging with the Commission, I can say Commission staff have always gone above and beyond to educate, inform, and allow for all stakeholders to participate at whatever level they're engaging from. So my general note of thanks to staff for that past effort and that continued effort, and to all stakeholders, know that we welcome your feedback and we want it as part of our processes. That said, we will now move to the consent agenda. Do any commissioners wish to comment on or recuse from voting on any items on today's consent agenda? I'll begin with Commissioner Berman.
Yes, on item 165, the Sag Harbor denying the petition for rehearing, I'm a no. I think that we should be taking up the petition for rehearing, and we should be looking at resolving that issue from the community. Item 266, which is a denial of a motion filed by Pope that seeking to deny the two rate cases based on alleged concerns, as well as item 462 Liberty, which is denying the motion filed by Long Island Clean Air, Water, and Soil. I'm going to be voting for those, but I do want folks to really take heed looking at those orders, looking at the language in the orders. I think it's very instructive, not just to the petitioners who brought the motions, but really to everyone in terms of rules of engagement and proper motion practice. I do think that we have been seeing an increase in perhaps unnecessary motion practice, and to the extent that we need to really make sure that we are moving forward in a way that is helpful. I think these motions were misguided, and they're coming from sophisticated parties who it concerns me that they felt the need to make these motions, especially because on its face it seems illogical and definitely not based in any viable reason to approve them. On 364 and 365, these are interconnection items. I will be concurring consistent with my votes. And on 390, which is the CES NYSERDA administrative, I'm going to be actually concurring on this. I do want to take a moment of personal privilege. I do think that NYSERDA has really taken ownership in trying to improve in information sharing and in streamlining their requests. I think they can continue to do so and make further continuous improvement. But I do want to say that I appreciate that we're not looking at what we saw last time where I denied it. So I'll be concurring. And thank you so much.
Thank you. Commissioner Alisi?
I will be supporting the entire consent agenda with all possible celerity.
Thank you. Commissioner Alisi? Oh, sorry, Commissioner Howard.
Thank you. First, consistent with my prior votes on item 363, I'm a no. I do have a comment on item 366, dealing with the Sunrise Wind transmission interconnect. There is no Sunrise Wind proposal that exists today that this will connect to yet. And I will be supporting it, but I do have a degree of concern if in fact the ultimate project doesn't happen, how much work, particularly physical work, gets done prior to that. And it's also, my yes vote is, this shouldn't presuppose what may happen in a NYSERDA bid environment. So again, I understand the timeline, and this is a broadly supported transmission project, which in many respects should be the envy of commissions across the state. But again, there's no project yet to connect to.
Just to be clear, I mean, there is a project out there. It's under a NYSERDA contract that has not been canceled. So because you started by saying there is no such project. There is a project.
Oh, that's it.
You're
I'm
done?
sorry.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay,
I'm done.
great, thanks. Okay. Commissioner Valesky?
No comments and no negative votes. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Majori?
Thank you. I'm going to have a few comments. On 165, which is Sag Harbor, and 266, which is Pulp, I wanted to say that I have empathy for the sentiments expressed in both of these petitions, but the way I view the decision before us is that it's a pretty narrow, the orders are pretty narrow in scope, and we're really being asked to assess whether our previous actions included a mistake of law or fact. And I agree with the staff analysis that they did not. So I'm going to be voting yes on those two items. I'm going back to 165, which is Sag Harbor. I also see a similarity with Order 368, which has to do with the Alley Cat project. And in both cases, the actions that we're going to be take are at odds with the intentions of local governments, which concern me because in both cases, the local governments assert that our actions hinder their ability to perform their own functions. I've already explained why I'm voting to deny the Sag Harbor petition. In the case of Alley Cat, I agree with the staff analysis that the county's proposed alternative would appear to cause a more adverse environmental impact than the plan agreed to in the JP. So I'll be voting yes on both of those items, although again, I have some sympathy for the petitioners. And then on item 462, which is the Liberty utilities, the motion before us is to stay a rate case indefinitely pending resolution of certain negotiations for municipal takeovers occurring outside the rate proceeding. So I'm very sympathetic to the argument for municipalization, but my understanding is that the main appeal is that by municipalizing the utilities, you would exempt them from property taxes and therefore lower the rates for the ratepayers. But the local governments could do this without municipalization. The local governments could lower their property taxes on the utilities before the municipalization process has been completed. And of course, I'm saying that as if there would be no impact on the local governments. There would be. But I'm not sure that the focus should be on delaying the rate case until the municipalization process is completed, rather than focus on how the local governments tax and at what rate they're taxing utilities, and if there's perhaps a more equitable way to raise revenue for the local governments. So I'll also be voting in the affirmative on 462, as with the rest of the consent agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. So do a call for the vote for the consent agenda. My vote is in favor of the recommendations on the consent agenda. Commissioner Berman, how do you vote?
165, I'm a no. 364, 365, and 390, I concur. All the rest, I vote yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Lisi?
Yes on all items.
Thank you. Commissioner Howard?
Yes on all items with the exceptions of item 363 where I am a no.
Thank you. Commissioner Valesky?
Yes on all items.
Thank you. Commissioner Majori?
Yes on all items.
Thank you. The items are approved and the recommendations are adopted. Thank you, everyone. Madam Secretary, is there anything further to come before us today?
There's nothing further.
Music to my ears. And with that, I adjourn. Happy holidays, everyone.